Welcome to Macon Memories. This is Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College. Today is November 2nd, 2011, and today I'm speaking with John Ahladas and Ranny Robertson.
Yes, hi, this is John Ahladas.
And Ranny Robertson.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Ahladas. Can you tell us when and how you happened to come to Randolph-Macon College?
Sure. I came to Randolph-Macon College in October of 1996. The reason I ended up at Randolph-Macon College was because I had taken an early retirement package from my previous employer, Dominion Resources, and my wife and I had been building a new house for about 8 or 9 months, and I was starting to get a little bored. And one Sunday, my wife was reading the Sunday Times Dispatch, and she said, Randolph-Macon College is looking for a treasurer. And so, although my background was in engineering, when I read the duties of the treasurer here, I had done most of the things. And so I felt, well, I live in Ashland. My wife is an alumnus of Randolph-Macon College. This looks like it might be a good thing for me to do next. And so I felt very fortunate to be selected to come to work for the college as its treasurer and chief financial officer. And you may say, how could somebody with an engineering background fit into that kind of a situation? The reason it worked well and I felt like I was qualified was because my previous employer was very good about having its employees receive additional training. And so actually I was sent to graduate school for nuclear engineering. And then I was on my own taking courses at the University of Richmond in business management, working towards a master's degree, which I never completed because of my other work duties at Dominion. And then before I came to work here, my predecessor, Mr. Bill Ball, suggested that I go to the University of Kentucky and take some coursework in college management, which I did. And so, again, I felt very privileged to be here and to be able to contribute somewhat to the improvement of the college.
Very good.
Well, I too retired early from Dominion Resources back in 1995, I believe, and I was fairly young. It was an early retirement, and I was after I worked on a farm for 6 or 8 months, I had all the fences repaired, so I needed something else to do. And I saw in the Herald Progress one day that the college was undertaking a large recreational center on campus. So I just sort of on a whim called the PR people here, and who was mentioned in the paper, and she told me to get in touch with Bill Ball, the treasurer. So I called Bill. Didn't know anybody here, but I do live in Ashland, and I'm about a mile from the college here. And I talked to Bill about my construction background. I had been project manager on various construction jobs for many years. I did it for the Air Force. I did it for nearly 30 years for Dominion Power, so it was pretty much a natural. And Bill said, I wouldn't mind some help on this project because it was a pretty large undertaking, and of course the college at the time didn't have any construction type department. So he brought me in to do that, and my plan was to be here for 18 months and do that job. And that was 15 years ago, and been here ever since. But it was good. I too am an engineer. I was registered in Virginia, North Carolina, and West Virginia, and it worked well because I could work with the contractors, and I even knew some of them from experience with Dominion. So that's pretty much how I came. I would comment that I like to tell folks every now and then that John and I have worked together for numerous years at Dominion, and when Bill called me one day and he says, Randy, he says, I'm going to retire, and he says, you're probably the only person on campus that knows who my replacement's going to be. I said, oh my, Bill, who is it? And he said, well, I can't tell you because the board hadn't voted on it yet. When do they vote? Oh, they vote this afternoon. I said, well, you call me after that meeting and let me know who it is. So lo and behold, it was John. And of course, that was great to hear. But I do tell people I was here for about a year, I guess, before John came. And for some reason, he knew I was here, and he came anyway. I never quite understood that, but we had a good relationship over the years. Very good.
And the other side to that story is I couldn't have been more pleased because I knew, again, as Randy said, I had known him for a number of years, and I knew what his work ethic was and his experience, and knew that there would be a number of projects we would be doing. And so I was extremely happy that Randy was here. He's really done a tremendous job.
Good. You want to talk about some of the projects that you worked on when you first got here?
Well, the main thing was the Brock Center. We worked on the Brock Center for quite a while. That was a good 18-month job, and it was a big job. But during that time frame, the college was on a capital campaign and did pretty well, and decided from that center they would go on and start PACE, and that was another interesting job. That PACE Hall was in pretty bad shape. The second floor was actually condemned. The first floor, it used to be a chemistry building, but it was housing, I think, some art studios at the time on the first floor. And I remember that we did that job. It turned out very nice, and Mr. Bill Armistead was a major donor on that project. And one of the stories that sticks in my mind after that job was it was a very hot summer day. We had the dedication of PACE after we'd done Brock, and Bill came out on the sidewalk that after that dedication and says, I think John was there, and I think maybe the president was there. He says, this was an awful lot of fun. He says, could you use another $1 million for something else? And I think we all looked at the old chapel all at the same time. So he really helped us get those two old campus buildings going. I would preface that a little bit by saying that Washington Franklin Hall had already been renovated prior to my coming here. So that one was in good shape on the old quad, but the other two were not in very good shape. One thing I noticed on PACE, to move on down the line a little bit, was we were researching the drawings one day to try to find out, when we were renovating the PACE, try to find out where some of the water lines or the utilities were. And I pulled out the drawings of Moreland Hall, which I had always wondered why it was so close to PACE. If you recall, there's only a little sidewalk between the two. And when I pulled out the site plan of Moreland, it had PACE dotted in with a big X on it, said to be removed. So I'm glad somebody came to their senses and didn't do that. It would have destroyed the historic quad, in my opinion.
Right.
So PACE was saved from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Well, from a business point of view, how was that coming on in the midst of all these projects?
Well, as Randy mentioned, we were towards the end of the early capital campaign, which had been started under President Liddell Payne. And so things were somewhat winding down. Monies had been raised, and we did have funds to do these projects. But the one thing that really helped us do another number of projects was the fact that Thomas Branch second and third floors were not being used. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to get into the renovation of Thomas Branch, converting it back into a dormitory on the upper two floors, which provided 64 beds and revenues for us to be able to do other projects on campus. Mm-hmm. And so we had, under President Martin, the 175th anniversary of the college, and there was a fair amount of fundraising done there, something on the order of $5 million, which went into the endowment, which also helped us. It was unfortunate that the capital campaign that was planned in 2001 didn't materialize because of the information technology bust and the drop in the stock market. And so a number of projects that we had hoped to move along more quickly didn't happen. But by renovating Thomas Branch at the time we did and having 64 additional beds from which we collected revenues, it allowed us to sequentially upgrade all of what were then called the motel dorms, which is now the freshman village, which consists of 7 buildings, 6 of which were modernized pretty thoroughly, and the 7th building less so, but still brought it up to speed. So there were a number of projects we were able to do during those years, even though we didn't have a capital campaign. And then, of course, when Bob Lindgren came here, he was able to raise funds that allowed us to do even more projects, such as Andrews Hall, for one in particular. The other projects that Randy and I worked on together more recently was the baseball field, the tennis court complex. We did a renovation of Crenshaw.
We got Smith Street relocated, which was the key to all of those projects out there.
That's right. A lot of interface with the town to get permission to do things. And if there's one thing that I have to say that I feel was a contribution that I made to the college, and again, this was with approval of the board, which has been very supportive, but we were able to buy property contiguous to the campus that allowed these other projects to take place. For example, we bought property on Henry Clay Road, which had we not owned that property, we would not have been able to build the tennis courts. We bought some property at the corner of Henry Street and relocated Smith Street. Had we not owned that property, we couldn't have relocated Smith Street. And so there were a number of key property purchases that were made during that time. We bought the Welcome Center, for example. And so things just worked out wonderfully well in that regard of being able to buy properties and then being able to use them to further a master plan.
Were you in on any of the conversations or discussions with the town about that, or is that the board or the president's office doing most of that negotiation with the town?
Well, with respect to getting approvals from the town.
I guess you could buy the property without the town's approval, but how
Yes.
the town, the relationship with the town as far as expanding
Sure.
their footprint?
Well, we, in some cases, had to get rezoning. In some cases, we had to get conditional use permits from the town. And so Randy and I both spent a fair amount of time talking with the town of Ashland planning staff, then the town of Ashland Planning Commission, and then the town of Ashland Town Council to get approvals. I don't know how many meetings we didn't attend at night and speak up in favor of the college's projects that required these actions. In addition to rezonings, we had to get site plan approvals. There were just a whole host of things that we had to do with the town. And I will say that the town of Ashland, in particular, after Bob Lindgren arrived on the scene, was very cooperative in supporting what we wanted to do. We certainly didn't get everything we wanted, but we got what we needed to move these projects forward. So.
Good. Well, were there any surprises when you were renovating old buildings? I'm sure you never know what to expect. So when you went into Old Chapel or the condemned upper floors, what sort of
I'd go back to Pace, I guess, on that question. When we started, and Pace was a completely gutted renovation. We took everything out of the building except the structural frame, the skeleton, if you will. But we found that some time back there had been a fire. A lot of the timbers inside the walls were severely scarred with charcoal from a fire. And after talking with Dr. Scanlon a little bit, we found out about the fire and actually found out that one of the fraternities did a bucket brigade and pretty much saved the building. But that sort of it speaks well for the building. Is that it's a tough old structure. They couldn't even burn it down. Probably had something to do with the fact it was a chemistry lab. I imagine at one time they may have had an experiment go wrong or something. I really don't know what caused the fire. But that all, it's in fact the scarring is still within the walls. It's covered again, but somebody else will find it in the next renovation, I guess. over at Thomas Branch was interesting because when we started working on Thomas Branch, let's see, the first floor had a few offices scattered around in it, a few staff offices. The second and third floors were barred shut, had plywood over the stairs and locks on them. And after we worked our way through the pigeons and the debris, we found an awful lot of old files from all kinds of different people, and it took a while to kind of sort some of those things out. Some of it may have come over in the archives over here. I'm not sure. I know we did find a whole lot of things from various fraternities and sororities. That at the time they probably said, "Oh, we don't care about that." But now, 20 years. That building was closed for some 25
Well over
years
20
or so.
years.
It was just boarded up. And of course now it's pretty much a jewel in the heart of the campus. But a lot of the fraternities and sororities picked up some of their old things from years past and have them in their houses now, more than likely. So, but that was a good job. I think that what I think back on as the best decision the college made during my tenure here is development of a master plan. When I came here, I wasn't familiar with college, the way they operate, the way they got their money, because being with a corporate company, we had a budget and it came in from revenue, which is the same here. However, we never had donors to deal with, and every now and then a donor will come in and say, "I want to do thus and so," and it's a very worthwhile project. Majority of them are very worthwhile, but we didn't have a master plan that kind of drove us. It made the donor kind of driving us, and then we had to react to that. So with the master plan, I believe that was in 2008, I believe, gave us a guideline as to where things could go or should go, and it really set a long-term plan for the college. That's what created the relocation of Smith Street. It's which allowed the baseball field. Without Smith Street relocation, we could never have done the baseball field. And Andrew's dorm is actually sitting right in the middle of old Smith Street. So that master plan went a long ways to kind of help us see the future and plan further out. It's about a 20-year look at upcoming projects. So now when a donor comes in and says, "I want to do something," you kind of go to the master plan and say, "Well, look, here, we could really use some help on this," because it's already there. So I believe that's helped a lot. I felt like that was a very strong and very good decision the college made on developing that master plan.
And the other thing it does for us is reserve open areas.
Yes.
And if a building is to be built, there's suggestions about where these buildings should go,
Right.
whether it be an additional dorm or an additional classroom building. So it's something that is tremendously useful. There was an earlier master plan, but it wasn't developed to the same degree as the one that we have now. So it's a very good roadmap. Not that it won't be revised at some point in the future, some changes, but at least the likelihood of building something in a space where it really shouldn't go is greatly reduced.
No, that's very helpful. Well, from the business point of view, when you became treasurer, you took over the heading up the business office at the college. What were some specific initiatives or challenges facing you there?
Probably the most significant issue that we had was the college's debt. It was something that the college was unable to cope with very well because of the size of the debt service payments that we had to make every year. So with the help of some board members, we restructured the college's debt and improved the cash flow situation. And also, it helped us improve our Standard & Poor's rating from an A- to an A, which meant that future borrowings would cost less in terms of the interest rates that would be applied to it. And the other challenges that existed are not terribly different than those that we see today, as far as we do well or we don't do well based on the number of students that enroll here. And so that particular challenge has been there for the whole time I've been here. The one thing that the college has been very good about, and it was driven by the Board of Trustees, and I may have said Board of Directors earlier, I meant Board of Trustees. I slipped back into my corporate world. But the Board of Trustees some time ago said that the college should present to them a budget which was balanced, and that is that expenses would not exceed revenues. And then they wanted controls in place that would keep the college during any 1 year from overspending. And one of the things that we were able to do was to bring in a new accounting system or an administrative computing system which tied all aspects of the college's operations into one software program, including modules that addressed admissions, modules that addressed development, college giving, modules that addressed the billing of students, the paying of bills, and so it was an enterprise-wide system that we implemented in, I think it was 2000, 2001. And what that allowed us to do then was to provide cost center managers with reports every month so that they could see how they were spending against what their budget was. And so one of the things that we did, which I think was also fairly significant, was to make the whole budgeting process more open and giving the folks who were requesting to spend money information that could help them decide whether or not they really could make the expenditure or not. So to some degree it was equivalent to, say, a bank providing a person with a checking account balance, except instead of just one balance, we probably had, I don't know, I'll say probably several hundred cost centers with individuals identified as being responsible for spending out of those accounts, if you will. And it worked well because we've had balanced budgets that started with my predecessor, I think for 32 years. We've had balanced budgets. So I would say, you know, as far as things that we did administratively, those are probably the more significant ones. There were many other things that were done just to try to make things go more smoothly. But I would say those are the two things that have made a difference.
I would say that John taught the college how to spell the word budget in capital letters. So.
Well, and apart from that, the regular operating budget, we did have capital project budgets. And I've got to, you know, give all the credit to Ranny for keeping the expenditures on those projects within the budgets that we had put together initially. The budgets that Randy put together, and we worked on some of these together, but it was mostly Randy's work, took into account all the various aspects of getting a project done. And so when we had a capital project budget and we took it to the board for approval so we could start construction, we felt pretty confident we wouldn't exceed what was in that budget. And I'd say I don't know of a situation where we ever had to go back to the board and ask them for more money on a project.
I don't think we went back to the board. We did bump the line a couple times, but I don't think we had to go back to the board.
But we had some contingency money in those projects, and you know, in anticipation of unforeseen, especially when you're doing renovations, because you just don't know what you're going to get into sometimes. But I would say that the level of cost control on projects was also extremely good.
It sounds like it. If you never,
And the renovations are kind of hard to control the cost on because you're not sure what you're going to get into. And it's interesting because I listed some, just in preparation for this discussion, I listed some projects. I didn't stop and do a tally as to what we've worked on over the years, but I went back and looked through some numbers. And after the Brock Center, which was a new building, the next new building that we did was Andrews Hall in 2011. So we went for 15 years there with doing all renovation projects, many dorms, a lot of various buildings. Some were just window changes and things like that, but they all had some cost impact. And I added up the cost bottom line in those 15 years. It's nearly $48.3 million that the college has put into facilities, into renovation of facilities here on the campus. And that doesn't include any maintenance or deferred maintenance, things like that. This is hard dollar construction. That's quite a sum of money, I think, over 15 years.
And I'll add to that, a fair amount of that money was spent on things that would make the college more efficient. We're Randy and I both concerned about protecting the environment, and so when we did renovations, for example, we went with high energy efficient windows, more insulation, low water use, shower heads.
And we're well on track for a LEED Gold certification on the Andrews Hall. We don't have that approved yet, but we're well on track. So,
tell us about that. Andrews Hall is a special.
well, Andrews was there's a statement in the master plan that we will attempt all of our new buildings to be LEED certified. LEED is a green initiative promoted by the government. There are several levels of certification. You can be just certified, or then you can go from silver to gold to platinum up the line. But so we set out to do Andrews LEED certified. We found out in doing that when we tallied up the points after the design came in, that, like John said, we wanted a lot of energy efficiency anyway. So we had high efficiency windows, high efficiency insulation. We looked at HVAC systems that were going to give us good efficiency. We found out that, gee whiz, we had LEED silver pretty well wrapped up. And as it turned out, with a few other donations that some folks have made and a decision that the president wanted solar panels on the roof, and we were donated a car charger, they all got us a few LEED points as well. We like I say, if we don't lose many in the analysis and the review by the government, we should have a gold certificate on that building, which is exciting, I think. Now that building has several things we did, not I would say not directly for LEED certification, but things that we felt were smart to do. One of them being the HVAC system. The heating ventilation is all done through a geothermal system. There's a soccer field just north of the building. It has 35 wells underneath it that go down 380 feet deep, and all the water that circulates through the heat pumps in the building goes down through those wells and returns to the building, and we're using that as the resource to heat and cool the entire building. The entire building is heat pumps that are geothermal. Another aspect we're doing is we have the guttering on the roofing system is all captured, and that water goes down into a 10,000-gallon underground storage tank or cistern, and we pump that water back up through, and we use it for toilet flushing. So we're not using potable water, so to speak, for toilet flushing. That was an interesting item there, because we found out that, we couldn't do that in Hanover County. It wasn't legal. So we sat down with the Hanover authorities, which worked very well with us, and they actually used this project to rework the county code. So now that is legal throughout the county. We were the first, and probably right now still the only, that are doing it. But that system has worked very well. And then, as I mentioned, we have solar panels on the roof that are generating very well. They're not enough up there to completely take care of the building, but they do offset our utility usage, our electric usage. Those are the major things. I mean, the things you do every day. You have good insulated windows, good heavy insulation. We have blanket. We have a good foam insulation up in the attic. It's a pretty tight building energy-wise. And we think we're saved from the base model. we think we're saving about 28% on our energy on that building from what a normal building construction would be.
So you'll see the benefit of that over time.
That's a
right.
long term, but
Right.
it is a benefit over time. Yes, it is.
And,
And all these energy projects actually have a return because they do save you money over time. Unfortunately, they do cost right much in the first level of it. Yeah.
yeah, might be a little extra cost up front. The college does have an environmental coordinator that works in physical plant, and efforts are being made to quantify the savings that we've been experiencing as the result of these energy efficiency aspects of these projects. And again, I've been a great believer if you can get a job done using a small amount of energy, then why use a large amount? And although I don't have hard numbers, I can tell you that even though the cost of heating fuels, natural gas, and electricity have gone up, our consumption has remained relatively flat when you remove the additional square footage that we've added. In other words, usage has gone up, but because we added Andrews Hall, let's say, or we air conditioned Crenshaw Gym where it wasn't air conditioned. But if you take those loads out, what you will find is that there have been savings in electricity, so that we haven't seen the amount of growth in utility expenses that we would have otherwise seen.
So it really has paid off.
Yes, I mean,
And
it's
Blackwell was air
definitely-
conditioned as well. That wasn't air conditioned.
Blackwell
when
was
we
not
came.
air conditioned either. Yeah. So, again, I'd like to think that we've done a very good job in trying to hold operating costs down, while at the same time making the campus easier to live in. And in fact, I think now probably Mary Branch is the only large building that's not air conditioned. I
So
may
that's
be
due
wrong
for
on
the
that.
Is that up for the next renovation?
At some point, it's in the
Yeah.
master plan to be renovated, right? It's just a matter of time, and it would take an interest on the part of a donor, I think, to make it work. So you never know when somebody might come along and want to contribute something towards that.
Can you talk a little bit about, well, both of you worked with so many departments on campus because of the nature of your work. I mean, being treasurer, you had an influence or relationship with every department on campus, and because you were doing project management, you had to work with many of the departments. Can you talk a little bit about how that has been, or how it was different from being at Dominion, when maybe you might have been more compartmentalized in your work? I don't know, but can you just talk about the breadth of your experience on campus?
Sure. I would say, and Ranny may want to clarify this to some degree, in the corporate environment, decisions tended to some degree to be driven from the top down, as far as making decisions to add a new building or having to add facilities or change facilities because the organizations were being changed. There was input from those that would be affected, but not to the degree that we've experienced here at the college. For example, on Andrew's dorm, we had conversations with students, asking them, what would you like to have in a dorm? Had several meetings late at night when the students were available, like 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, right.
As a matter of fact,
When they were awake.
yeah, which was extremely helpful. Then we had discussions with our board of trustees because of their interest, and then there were discussions with respect to things that a donor might be interested in, and then we work with outside architects to do the detailed design work, so they provided some input. And when it came to some of these projects that required action by the town, we actually met with neighbors of the college and got their input as to what their preferences might be in different situations. And I would say in particular with the development of the master plan, having town input with respect to where we were planning to locate buildings or reserve space for buildings and so forth to take their concerns into consideration. So I would say probably a lot of front-end work to make sure that everybody was on board to the degree that we could get everybody on board before actually putting a shovel in the ground and starting work.
I enjoy those discussions with the off-campus community, if you will. In fact, later this afternoon, I'm taking my replacement over to meet the planning director of the town of Ashland because where there's a lot of interplay between what we do and what they do because we're the elephant in the room. But I would go back and say that some of the things that I've really enjoyed as a project manager in construction was getting to know what some of our faculty and staff did in their respective areas. I'm an engineer. I know nothing about artists, but I enjoyed working with Ray Berry and bringing Pace Hall back into usable conditions. I didn't know anything about theater or acting, but working with Joe Mattis, we moved the Black Box Theater out of Old Chapel and put it over in the Blackwell Auditorium. Learned a lot about how that operates. So I was learning all the time from each of those, all of those people. I mean, I mentioned two, but there's numerous ones all through campus. Of course, we did a lot of dormitories, so I got quite familiar with the Res Life people, and learned, like John said, we try to find out what the student wants. We have our own ideas, but we need to make it. The buildings need to operate for the people that are in them, and that's where the faculty, staff, and students all come into play, and how you design and how you undertake a project. Some of the hardest things I would say that we did was. Of course, this is an active college community, and all of these renovations had to be done while students were studying and underway. One quick story I remember: the old chapel is fairly close to Moreland Hall, and we were working in the old chapel. Most contractors go to work about 7 or 7:30 in the morning, and I got an email one day from a student saying, "By golly, you're going to cause me to flunk out. I can't study. You're waking me up." And so I emailed him back. I said, "Well, what time do you think would be appropriate for us to start work?" And I got an email back that said 11 a.m. I didn't even answer that one. But you have to work with all those structures and what's going on around you. And Thomas Branch was another good example. We had to find places for those offices that were in there to go while we were renovating, and and now I think the college is embarking on a few projects now that are going to have that same space problem for temporary. Like John said, because the Thomas Branch building was empty, and when we moved the beds into there, that did open up work for those other dormitories down at the north end of campus. Because if we didn't have those, which is 66 beds, we wouldn't have been able to empty, say, Jones or Garland or something to do those renovations. And we actually moved the students from one to the other as we renovated. One of them was out of service for probably 2 semesters, I guess, each time. It could have been one. I don't think we did it one semester, did we? I think it was probably 2.
Some went over the summer. So
yeah, that's right. It was
only
summer,
affected one
semester in summer.
2 semesters we usually affected.
But that was kind of a domino thing, and it worked well for us because we did have that overflow area. So. But it's been fun. I got to know a good number of the staff and a good number of the faculty, and have enjoyed knowing every one of them. It's just been it's been a ball. I look at the future of the master plan. The college is already looking at football, in addition to the to the library, campus center work. All those things are coming up, and I kind of envy my replacement because I'm not going to be here to help with that or get involved in that. But I do wish I wish them well on continuing that master plan. The college I think has been moving in the right direction and a strong direction, and I look forward to many good projects to come. So I'll be looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, you're right in town. You'll be driving by.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I will say this with respect to the upcoming projects, Randy and I have been involved in a lot of the early stage planning and conceptual design work. And in some respects, I would have liked to have seen some of those through to the end. On the other hand, I'm almost 70 years old, and at some place you have to slow down.
Right.
So it was a good time to make a transition with the completion of the projects that we had completed, but also feeling pretty good about having a hand in the early work that was done to get approval for some of these other projects. So I feel pretty good about that. It's mixed feelings.
Yes.
Not to be here through completion, and yet on the other hand, sometimes you just know it's time to move on.
Right.
So
Agreed.
And both of you, it sounds like, had a nice transition in the way you retired from a college. You transitioned well by being the college was able to hire Paul Davies. And
yes,
overlap for a while.
I've got to give Bob Lindgren all the credit in the world because we knew there was going to be an overlap, but he decided to move ahead and make it a long overlap, which lasted about a year. So basically, what it did, it was really wonderful working with Paul and making an orderly transition to the point where I don't think anybody missed me when I walked out the door. Towards the end of August. Things were in pretty decent shape, I felt, and Paul was completely up to speed. In fact, we changed offices on the 1st of July, so because I wanted to finish out the fiscal year with respect to budgets and so forth. So really for July and August, Paul was in charge, and I was more or less assisting him in what he wanted to do. So it just, things went really, really well in that regard.
It seemed like it did. That was good. And you two are now meeting with your replacement.
My replacement came on board yesterday, but I don't think we're going to miss a beat with him because Mark Brabham has been a project manager for a number of years at William & Mary, doing the same thing that I do for Randolph-Macon. So I think he will step in and work will continue without a hiccup. So I really do think that that's going to work very well. It worked then, and the college worked well for me too, because I told John and Paul that I would stay in complete Andrews. I really didn't want to leave the college in the middle of a project. So I completed Andrews, but didn't really start anything on, say, the football field or the next project's coming. That worked well for me. And now that Mark is here, he can, like I say, he can pick right up, and he's already got the experience. He knows the number of the contractors we already work with, so and suppliers. So I think it's going to be just painless and smooth.
That's great. That's good. Well, what do you it's a little summary question. What do you see as the watershed events in the life of the college during your time here? The master plan you've mentioned, I think, is one.
Yeah.
I would have to go with the master plan. I think that has shaped us for a number of years.
I would say I've been here under 3 presidents. Liddell Payne for a very short period of time. Rusty Martin for maybe 8 or 9 years. And then Bob Lindgren. And I would say that each of those presidents had their own way of doing things and had their own personalities and so forth. So I would say when the new president comes in, it generally tends to change a focus, changes priorities. So I would consider those changes as being somewhat watershed events. I will say about Rusty Martin, who I work very well with, that he did go through a difficult time with melanoma, and I don't think people really understood how deathly ill he was at the time, to the point where I would see him walking around campus, and this is after going to Johns Hopkins and getting treatments for his melanoma, that he struggled physically.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful that he's recovered and has not had a recurrence.
Mm-hmm.
They did a great job up at
Mm-hmm.
Johns Hopkins with some experimental treatment that really worked well for him.
Mm-hmm.
But we got an awful lot done under Rusty Martin, even though the capital campaign that was planned under him never happened.
Mm-hmm.
A number of those projects that Ranny mentioned did happen when Rusty
Mm-hmm.
Martin was here. And
Thomas Branch being the
Thomas
main one.
Branch for
Yeah,
one,
he
and
really,
then
he
again
really brought that one.
all of the freshman village dorms and Blackwell Auditorium and the old chapel. I mean, a number of those projects were done. I will say that when Bob Lindgren came, it was a fairly significant change
Mm-hmm.
in terms of focus and I'm going to say a re-energizing of the campus, which I would consider that as a watershed event, and he's done a great job of raising monies that allowed us to move on a number of these more recent projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say those are, to me, were the things that really impacted what I was focusing on and what we considered to be the priorities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for me, those would be the watershed events.
Thank you. Well, any anecdotes or stories that you'd like to share about people or an experience while you were working here that you remember?
Well, I have to say, when I came to work for the college, my goal was that I could contribute something to the betterment of the college. And I felt very fortunate over the years that I was here to have people working for me who were excellent at what they did, that I think to some degree helped me achieve that goal. One person certainly can't do that much by oneself, but when you've got a good team of people and everybody's kind of pulling together, then things happen and happen well. And so I'd like to think that if you want to look at things from a historical perspective somewhere down the road, people would say, you know, that was a good 15-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully people will feel that things had improved. And I think with Paul Davies taking my place, there's every reason to think things will continue to improve. So I think each of us who have been entrusted with certain responsibilities want to live up to the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my hope,
Mm-hmm.
that I have lived up to expectations.
I'm sure you've exceeded them.
Yeah.
How about you, Mr. Robertson? Any anecdote about a people or project or anything?
I've mentioned about Bill Armistead. I think that was a fun day. But overall, no, it's been nice. I think the college has funded some very good projects. I hope we've pulled them off in good fashion. I like to tell people that, you know, when we build a building, we're going to expect to own it for 150 years, and I think we've got structures out there that we will. Future generations will look back and look at these buildings and say, I'm hoping they'll say, you know, they were well done. So hope so. But it's been fun. it's been fun. Like I say, I plan to be here for about 18 months, and that was 15 years ago. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a good ride. I really enjoyed it.
Good. Any final thoughts?
No, other than I'm going to, somewhat miss the close relationship I've had with Randy over all these years, and but I still live in Ashland, and I drive down England Street practically every day, and so the campuses there are never very far away from my thoughts, and also the all the good folks that I met while I was here. I cherish that.
Well, I'm sure you'll both be back for some groundbreakings in the near future. And
Hope to see some of them.
dedications.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I know you're
Yes,
looking forward to
indeed.
that.
And this, John, and maybe we won't be meeting in the office on occasion, but we can always meet in Suzanne's or the Iron Horse,
yeah.
or there's plenty of places around. No problem.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
It's been,
Thank you.
It's been very good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for making memories with us here today.